All right, let's go to the Bud Light Hotline and kick it off with the voice of the Crimson Tide, Eli Gold. Good morning, Eli.
Good morning, Gary. How are you?
I'm excited to have you on. Now, I hope I'm right. I think you're about to enter your 30th season calling Alabama football. Is that correct?
Well, people always get it confused, and I'll tell you why. This will actually be my 29th year
you
doing
did basketball
football,
1 year, right?
But I did a year of basketball before I started football. So it's my 30th year with the network, but this is my 29th year of doing the football games. That very first year, I came in and did basketball, which would have been the 88-89 season, while John Forney came back to do the 88 football season.
That's right.
To give him 30 years. And then I began the football in 1989, the fall of 89.
Well, your first season, you kicked it off with an SEC championship, and you've seen plenty of them since. National titles, too. 5 national titles you called, or national championship wins, and another game where Alabama came up short last year. I just give us some insight. When you're preparing for a new season, I know you're in the process of doing that now. What goes into that, your preparation to get ready for a brand new year?
Well, what I did, for instance, this past Saturday, of course, I was there for the practice. I come to a number of practices, but I was there Saturday sitting up in the press box, so I would get the vantage point that I will have on Saturdays. And it wasn't so much that I was looking at what the team was doing, although, that's always interesting and informative, but I was looking at what the players look like, how they stand, how they run, who has a lot of hair sticking out from the back of his helmet, because you don't always get to see the number. Sometimes the player is positioned in such a way that you don't see the jersey number. And this was a particularly good practice for that because, the uniform numbers were not even on the side of the helmet yet. They don't get put on by, the training, the equipment staff until closer to the first game. So I was really checking the jersey numbers and then looking at the players and making notes, how they run, how they stand, anything of a particular nature that might just help me on a Saturday if I can't see the jersey number. So, I do that. I put together, of course, there is no such thing as a depth chart, as we know. Coach Saban doesn't release a depth chart. But I made notes of my own of who was running with what I expected to be the first team and so on, just to help me get ready and just to make sure to help me memorize the names and numbers. So, when I see, a given number, I don't automatically call it the name of the guy from last year. That's just stuff you do. You don't want to call, Jonathan Allen's name if Vidarian Mathis is out there making the play or something. So, it's little stuff like that. Then I start putting together biographical information that I use on my spotting chart. I get on the phone with other people. Yesterday I was chatting with Stephen McCartney, who is the sports information director for football down at Florida State. I touched base yesterday with the guys out at Colorado State just to see what's going on, to get some preliminary information because, next week is our first Hey Coach and Nick Saban show. Although Coach Saban doesn't join us until the 31st, the show begins next Thursday, the 17th. So I like to have a little something stashed away to be able to talk moderately knowledgeably again about, Fresno State and Florida State and Colorado State. So that's what you do. You do all of that. And then, you're throwing in on top of that, I'm doing some SEC network soccer to go with all the stuff I did last year. They asked me to do last year women's and men's basketball on the SEC network, baseball and softball. This year we've added some soccer. So I've been, touching base with Wes Hart and getting information. They play this Thursday against Middle Tennessee, although it's not being televised. I'm going to be there to watch and learn. So, it's a busy time of the year, but it's a fun time of the year.
Indeed it is. And I found it interesting what you were saying about watching the players and not focused on the number. Their mannerisms, like you said, the way they walk. That way, as you and you know, you have a great spotter in Butch. I know you can actually see those guys on the field a lot of times, and you don't even need to see their number. You know
That's
who
it.
they are.
I remember doing a game many years ago. As some of your listeners know, I do some NFL games on Sundays, about 10 games a year, and I was doing a Colts game, an Indianapolis Colts game, a number of years ago, and I forget the scenario, but there had been some injuries early in the day, and then, guys were substituting and this, that, and the other, and then all of a sudden, I see this guy in the backfield. I had missed somebody trotting onto the field, is what happened. Both Butch and I were looking at something else. We missed somebody trotting onto the field, and this guy lines up in the backfield, and he had the dreadlocks coming out from underneath the back of his helmet. And I just knew from my homework that there was only one guy, on the Colts roster who had that, and that was Edgerrin James, who had come back into the ball game after being banged up early, and I didn't see him trot back in. I just missed it. But, good thing I recognized him because, indeed, he got the handoff on that particular play. So, yes, being able to spot people by running style. I mean, you're never going to confuse Bo Scarborough's style with a lot of other people. Bo runs kind of up and down, or at least it looks that way to me, from the press box. You see that running style go by, it's Bo. And so those are just little tricks of the trade when you just can't see the numbers, but you got to do your homework. You've got to have seen that previously, to be able to use it on game day.
Eli Gold, voice of the Crimson Tide, our guest here on the Gary Harris Show, kicking off the program. All right, your first season was 89 with Bill Curry. Then you went through Gene Stallings, Mike DeBose, Dennis Franchione. Mike Price, unfortunately, did not coach a game other than the 8A game, which I called with Taylor Watts. So I like to tell people, Eli, I called the only game that Mike Price ever coached at Alabama. Then Mike Shula, and now Nick Saban. 10-win seasons. Every one of those coaches that coached a game had at least one 10-win season.
Right.
Most of them had an SEC title. Gene Stallings had a national championship. But this 10-year run with Nick Saban, now going into its 11th season, as I said, you've been a part of 5 SEC titles with him, 4 national titles, just narrowly missed another one last season. I know that you and most people that follow Alabama football had a good feeling when Nick Saban came in here that this thing was going to get back on track. But did you ever imagine, Eli, that it would be to this level of success? Did that cross your mind that he could do this?
I don't honestly know if it crossed my mind to this level. I think the thing that surprised me the most at that time was how quickly things turned around. That was the first thing. When we all knew coming in that Coach Saban was an outstanding coach. The man is a genius and has a wonderful, something that people never mention. I don't know why they don't, but he has the ability to recruit not only players but coaches. He has had a magnificent coaching staff, so you knew the team was going to be good. At that point, I said, well, I wonder how quickly it's going to take to turn this thing around. And obviously it happened very quickly. And then, do you ever presume all these national championships? Well, as a fan, I guess we all hope for them. But do you ever presume that? I don't know if you really could. So it's been a remarkable run. And the Lord willing and the creek don't rise, it's nowhere near done.
I know you get questions from fans all the time, and along with the coaches and the players, you're one of the faces of the program. That's just the reality of being the Alabama football play-by-play announcer. And I know one of the frequent questions you get, because people even ask me to ask you when I talk to you, if I have you on air, what was your favorite game to call or favorite games to call? And I know there's many of them, and some of them probably the most recent, but just give us 3 or 4, and they don't necessarily have to be national championship games.
Yeah.
Some of your more memorable broadcasts.
One of the most memorable was in that first season for me of 1989, when Alabama goes to Memorial Stadium in Jackson, Mississippi to play the Ole Miss Rebels. And I'm sure many of your listeners are nodding right now listening. But if that was the game where Alabama trailed 21-0 before you even had a chance to sit down. I remember vividly sitting in the booth, and we go to a commercial break, and myself and Doug Layton, who was the color man at the time, and the late Burt Bank, our producer emeritus, we all kind of looked at each other and said, my God, what in the world is going on here? Bama was down 21-0, like in no time flat. And then, of course, Alabama scores the next 62 in a row, and the earth is spinning on its axis correctly again. But that is one that is always in my mind. One of the other memorable ones clearly was the Terrence Cody field goal block against Tennessee to preserve that victory in that game when he had 2 field goal blocks. We all remember that, because if not for that, there's probably no SEC title, there's no national title. Along that same vein, I remember being up in State College, Pennsylvania, after here came the last play of the game, a field goal attempt from about the half-yard line. Ray Tarasi, a kid from Pittsburgh, comes trotting in to attempt this chip shot field goal, and Thomas Rayam raises up and swats the football out of midair, and that, of course, preserved the Alabama victory in State College. That was huge. In the national championship realm, of course, they were all big. That's needless to say. All the wins were big. I think the one that was probably most impactful to me, just from a historic standpoint, was the game against Texas at the Rose Bowl Stadium, simply because that brought University of Alabama history kind of back around full circle. We all know the old story, about how Southern football wasn't respected back in the old days, and Bama goes to the Rose Bowl and shows everybody what Southern football was all about. Well, here again, Bama was playing for the national title at the Rose Bowl Stadium against Texas. Marcel Darius had a wonderful game. Eric Anders covered that loose ball late. That is one that sticks in my mind. And, of course, there were some negative ones, too. I mean, your question was memorable.
Right.
That doesn't make them favorites.
That's
by
right.
any stretch. Those who I just talked about were favorites. Clearly the game at Auburn, that kick six will be memorable.
For everybody.
For everybody. It sure as heck wasn't a favorite, without, to say the very least. But, that was, certainly a memorable day. And even in basketball, one of my most memorable was when Alabama in the 1990 West Regionals with Wimp Sanderson coaching went out west and beat Colorado State and Arizona to advance to the round of 16 in Oakland, California. And Bama drew Loyola Marymount University right after their superstar Hank Gathers had passed away on the court. And, there were people who'd never followed college basketball in the world. My mother included, God bless her. She didn't know if a basketball was stuffed or blown up. But that night, she watched that game from her home in New York City because the whole nation was captivated about Loyola Marymount coming back a few days after Hank Gathers had passed away. And it was a magnificent, emotionally charged evening. So that's going to be one of those very memorable nights as well.
Gosh, I'm all looking up at the clock, and we're already getting short on time. That's the way it goes when you're having fun. A couple more things I want to ask you about, though, Eli, and you and I have a chuckle about this before. A kid from New York that grew up watching the New York pro teams, got to Alabama via hockey, and you're associated with two of the most Southern sports traditions we have. One of the longtime voices of NASCAR, and, of course, Alabama football. It's kind of ironic in a way that you're –
It really is.
Yeah.
Hey, and I used to talk about that with the late, great Mel Allen. Mel from Bessemer, Alabama,
right?
A former voice of the Crimson Tide when he, as Melvin Israel, was a student at the University of Alabama, and then he went from Bessemer up to the Bronx to become the voice of the New York Yankees, where he and Red Barber, who was another Southern guy from Columbus, Mississippi, where they held court for years and years and years. You just never know in this world, Gary. I was very, very blessed. I was very lucky, to come down here in the first place to do hockey. Our family found a home here. We've loved it here. And then, of course, to be asked to become the voice of the Tide back in 1988, 89 was something that I could never have imagined, and I thank God for it every single day.
A couple questions I get from fans a lot, too, in regards to Coach Saban is how much longer you think Coach Saban will coach, and in regards to you, because people know I know you, is how much longer you think Eli will call the games. And my answer is I think quite a few more years. I mean,
well, Eli will call the games for as long as the university will have him and for as long as I am physically and mentally able to do so. I am in the early stage of a new 10-year contract, so that's there in place. I don't think the contract expires for another 8 years yet or something like that. So I intend to stay, and Lord willing, I'll renew again after that 10-year deal is over. As far as when Coach Saban is going to retire, I've got a deal for you. You ask him. I've never brought it up. I have no intention of bringing it up. I mean, the man is a very young, what is he, 65 now?
Yeah, turned 66 in October.
He's a very young man. He's in great shape. He's successful. I mean, you can see he loves what he's doing. I mean, he really does. So I have never asked him. I would never be so presumptuous as to ask him. But I can't imagine that he's going to step away anytime soon. He still loves what he does.
Well, you said it. He loves it, and you love what you do. It's been a heck of a partnership, so both of you need to keep going for about another 10 years, in my opinion. Finally, Eli, as you're preparing for this season, and the easy answer is Alabama's going to be really good. I think we know that. It'll probably come down to 2 or 3 plays in 2 or 3 games that will dictate whether or not they're back in the playoff or they're having one of those years with a couple 3 losses like 2010 and people are gnashing their teeth. But just your feeling as you get into your preparation for what this team could accomplish. Do you see it as a team that if things go their way and they play well, that can be back in that playoff and competing for a national championship again?
I don't see why that couldn't happen. You never presume anything in this business, and you know that, Gary. You never presume anything in this business. Plus you take a look. There is some youth, as Coach Saban said at SEC Media Days. There is probably more youth on that defensive side than we've seen in a long time. But youth doesn't translate to lack of talent. It translates to lack of experience. But it doesn't translate to lack of talent. And we've all seen how well the Alabama coaches have worked with guys who had lack of experience. Case in point, Jalen Hurts, among others. So this is going to be a very, very good team. The offense is absolutely loaded. I think all of us respect that and see that. And the defense is still, even with youth, and again, there is no depth chart per se, but, you got Deshaun Hand, you got Deron Payne, you got, Raekwon Davis, who, for crying out loud, you can see him from outer space. The guy is so big, and you got Buggs and Jennings. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. Experience, well, obviously, Raekwon is a sophomore and Jennings is a sophomore and Buggs has limited Division I experience and so on. But, no, this is going to be a very, very good team. However, the depth chart comes out. Whoever is placed where by Coach Saban, this has the chances again of being an outstanding, outstanding ball club.
Lastly, Eli, you've worked with 3 color men, I think, during your tenure. Doug Layton, the late Doug Layton, the late Kenny Stabler, and now Phil Savage.
Actually, to be technically correct, I've worked with 17. You forget that one year where I had 14 different color guys.
That's right.
We auditioned people on the air every week. But, yes, on a full-time basis, you're 100% correct. Dougie Doo, the Snake, and now Phil.
Yeah, and you're a pro, so I know that when people listen, they're going to enjoy it. But you seem to have had an unbelievable chemistry with all 3 of your color guys. And, in fact, you and Phil now, it's just a phenomenal partnership. Is that the case? Were you as close with these guys as it appears when you're listening to you do the radio broadcast?
It's interesting. We are all very, very friendly. We were all very friendly. So, yes. But friendly doesn't necessarily make it close. we didn't necessarily hang out together. You know, Snake ran in his circle. I have my own friends. Phil and I, because of the difference in our geography, he lives down in Fairhope, and I live up in Birmingham. You know, we don't see each other. I will see Phil on Saturday. Now, barring a special event, but for normal weeks, I'll see Phil on Saturday, and then I'll see Phil the next Saturday. Now, you know, we get together. I've been to the Senior Bowl, yada yada, and so on. But the fact is, Gary, one of my favorite sayings is, "I know what I don't know." I know what I don't know. I know that I have never taken a snap in the SEC. I know I've never taken a snap as a quarterback who's won a Super Bowl. I know I've never been a general manager in the National Football League. Why would I want to go into their area of expertise? I mean, the fans want to hear it from the guy who's won the Super Bowl, from a guy who's on the all-decade team at Alabama. They want to hear it analyzed by a guy who's been a general manager. I mean, why would Eli presume to ever go there when you got experts sitting beside you? No different than when Joe Namath comes and joins us, which he does 3 times a year. You know, I would have Snake sitting to my right and Joe Willie standing to my left.
How about that?
Why the heck would I? Yeah, pretty good. But why the heck would I want to start analyzing football? I'd just call the play and hush up and let those boys go. So we get along really well. We are friendly, but, you know, we all prepared in our own way. We brought all of our different notes to the booth on Saturday. And then, you know, we just went to it. And other than when I have some business to attend to do a live commercial or to pause for station identification or something like that, you know, other than that, the color man knows he's going to talk after virtually every play, because what he has to say is going to be a whole heck of a lot more knowledgeable than what I have to offer to the listeners. So nobody lacks for airtime. We all get along wonderfully. But do we hang out? I mean, we're all very friendly. But I don't hang out with Phil. I don't see him except on Saturdays. I didn't hang out with Snake, you know, other than at special events or something. But, you know, we'd see each other on Saturdays. And then it would be, hey, man, have a good week. See you next week. You know, when are you getting to Knoxville, whatever it might be? He said, all right, maybe I'll catch you for dinner. And rarely did we even get together for dinner, not because of anything other than, you know, our schedules were different. We all had different stuff going on. So we get along wonderfully because I give those guys every opportunity to connect with the fan and connect with the listener because they have the knowledge. I can study till the cows come home, man, and I study a lot, but I will never be able to bring the been there and done that element to a broadcast that they can. So I just lean on them for all they're worth because that's what makes them so good. That's what makes them what they are.
A pro's pro. That's what you are, Eli. It's a pleasure listening to you. Appreciate the time this morning, and looking forward to September 2nd.
Yes, it'll be here before we know it, and we look forward to it. And keep up the great work on the radio. And I'm glad you and I have talked a lot. I'm glad your voice issues of a while ago have gotten rectified, and I'm thrilled. We watch you on the tube all the time at night, so keep up the great work.
Thank you, Eli.
All right, man. See ya.